Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
All right, and we're back. We've been off gallivanting all over the place, but, we need to have a break sometime, don't we, Steve? But, we've got too much to talk about, to get into any of that. We've got to get right into it. And I know I didn't flag this ahead of time, but this is officially going to be our last Skype recording. And, we've got to, shed a tear for that. And we've got to find some options going forward, which might be fun. But, I am going to miss Skype because it's been quite a good force for us in our pipeline.
Yeah, well, it's only when a good friend leaves that you realise how much you're going to miss them. Goodbye, Skype.
Yep, absolutely. So we might experiment with a few things, but I'm sure we'll probably only end up with the same one depending on how it's all going. But as long as we can record ourselves, it's fine. It's 2025. Surely we should be able to knock it off, so it should be good.
A bit surprising that we don't have more choice, but there you go.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to get into this social media influencer story, and I'll just obviously read out this headline of, Brooke Bakehouse has been accused of plagiarizing by Recipe Tin Eats founder. Got to get all the hashtags and handles correct. And of course, the question is can you own a recipe? It's copyrighted and all that. Look, there's a whole can of worms here that I'll probably get into a bit later with you, but the thing that I wanted to start with is I saw this appear on Breakfast News while I was away last week, and I could not believe that they were spending. Well, first it made it to the news. That was the first thing, and then they proceeded to spend 10 to 15 minutes on this story. It wasn't just here's the story. There was, a back and forth. There was an interview. There was an analysis and a discussion. And my reaction was like, what the hell is going on here? How is this even a story? Basically. Now, that might be my anti-social media bias coming out there because, as I may have indicated on past episodes, I'm not usually a fan. I know it's irony. We've got our podcast and we use YouTube. I've got a Facebook account I still post to for to get some links out and stuff, but ultimately I don't really use it, and for good reason, which I think is for for things like this, because yes, there's money involved, obviously, and that's why it gets elevated to this level of discourse, for lack of a better term. But this story essentially has everything in it as to why I would never want to use social media ever again.
Well, yeah, I guess you could take a step back. I mean, firstly, the best thing about this is two bakers going biffo. So what's not to love? Two bakers with two teams, two separate tribes on social media. So we're polarized right from the start. Pick a side and pile on. It could be any topic at all. It just happens to be baking. I think what's interesting about this, is that the real dispute is over printed hard copy books, and not so much, although the allegation is of plagiarism, but I think it's encroachment on someone else's turf is really what it is. So, someone's raised something about someone else and they've kind of, their supporters have fought back and it's an all-in brawl. What's not to love?
Oh, well, just to tease that out a little bit, like, again, it's only something that happens in this modern online level of discourse, for lack of a better term. Like on the one side, you've got Brooke Bellamy being, dropped as, whether she's sponsoring or ambassadoring something or whatever. That people are dropping her like anything. Then on the other side, the person behind the other account. See, I'm already forgetting handles already. They're getting trolled by people probably from the other side, which is again what you were saying before about the pile-on, and it's like it's just playing to the worst instincts of everything, and arguably over this is probably a more frivolous thing, eating, cookbooks, recipes and whatever. What happens if it's something a bit more serious? And I'm not saying that, there's probably something like that happening right now somewhere else in a more, with something more serious potentially.
Well, that's right. And I'll point out that both of us are really commentating on what we're observing rather than the allegations per se. But on that alone, in all this reporting we've seen, I'm still yet to see a concrete allegation, and I'm still yet to see actually a concrete defence. There's an inference that there's plagiarism, and there's an inference that it wasn't plagiarised. But nobody's actually proven anything, because as far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be a lot of very clear basis for this, because of the confusion around what constitutes copyright and intellectual property in a recipe, and the fact that you can make the argument that basically you have to copy parts of recipes if you're making a particular kind of base or a particular kind of custard. If you don't use ingredients in those quantities, well, then they're just not going to work. So I'm no expert in this field, and I wouldn't claim to know who was right or wrong, but you could be extremely cynical if you wanted and just say, well, the publicity from this will benefit both of them in the end.
Well, just to pick up on that point, because that's exactly where I was going to go to next, not that I'm suggesting that this is actually what's happening, but there's a part of me that's cynical and suggests that, is this a put-up job, to drive clicks to both channels or to subsidiary channels? Like, it's entirely possible in this world that we're living in.
And even if it didn't start off that way, if the original allegation wasn't motivated by that, there are plenty of people around who know that they can profit if they turn it into this. So you and I are highly cynical about social media and the activities that occur in that sort of field. And I think that probably that's what we're pointing to more broadly, that's the sort of thing that creates big stoushes out of something that maybe isn't quite so bad.
And the last thing I wanted to touch on was just the traditional media and the fact that they, launched into this story as well. Maybe it was newsworthy, maybe it wasn't newsworthy, or maybe they're just trying to, join in because this is the way you stay relevant. You have to stay on top of these stories because social media is a much stronger force in the news world these days, and they don't have any choice but to pick these things up.
Well, if I was in the newsroom and I saw the size of both of these protagonists' followings, and I realised they were greater than what I've got in my newsroom, or they could contribute a significant proportion to my following, I'd definitely be out to try and attract them.
Yeah, so there you go, everyone. At the end of the day, it's all about the clicks, and it's all about the subscribers, and it's all about the views.
It feeds on itself.
Yes, absolutely.
Let them bake and let them eat cake.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think we've had enough of that. Let's do have one more story and another Apple one. And I've only picked this out only because there is one aspect of it that interests me. So there's been rumors recently that WWDC is coming up, so the usual software announcements are going to be made for the coming year. iPad OS 19 is apparently going to feature some new multitasking capabilities. Now, they've said that for years. They've introduced features that they claim are multitasking. Sure, I guess you can do it. I don't think anyone's ever really satisfied with what they come up with for the iPad, because it's still an iPad. Like, it still functions like an iPad. And I guess if you really want to do that true multitasking, you should be getting a Mac anyway to do that sort of thing.
Surely you need more than one screen. That's
right. And they're more than happy to sell them to you, I'm sure. Now, it may be that they do introduce, expanded functionality for multitasking for iPads when they announce it in June. But what really caught my eye on this one was that they might actually be also allowing the iPhone to do this. Now, that actually does open something that is quite interesting, which is the idea that you can plug your phone into a screen, and you might not get full Mac OS maybe, but if you get a desktop experience, now, I'll just back up and just say that all the Samsung people are going to say, yeah, but we've had that with DeX for 10 years already. fine, this is iOS, this is Apple, they've never had it. So it is kind of a big deal for iPhone users. But if they manage that, I think there's a potential very interesting workflow scenario there that shouldn't be ignored, actually, if they manage to introduce it. And it would overshadow anything that they announced for the iPad, funny enough, as well.
It's interesting that you say that, because I agree. I think, you know, I don't want to be down on the whole Samsung thing, but I've used their tablets and experienced some of their ecosystem, and it wasn't quite as smooth as I would have liked. The fact that Apple integrates everything, you're absolutely right. If you can go from the phone to the Mac through the phone, then, you know, or an iPad towards a Mac, then suddenly you are creating something much more powerful, because every aspect of your post-PC personal computing environment becomes accessible through that pathway in ways which I don't think any other hardware provider can actually recreate. So it would be a huge step forward.
Well, I kind of think of it as like, you know, if I go for a 2-week trip somewhere, I can use my phone as the primary computing device for everything. I literally don't need to take anything with me. So if you add that extra step that you can just plug it into a screen, and then you get a desktop experience, there might be people out there that would actually just forgo getting any other devices at that point, potentially.
Well, it's interesting, but both of us having just been away traveling, if I could have accessed files which normally I would have to go to my laptop for through my phone while traveling, you know, which sure I can do now, I can save, you know, but that whole idea of extending the Apple ecosystem into true multitasking across platforms, you then realize that's incredible power. It semi-exists now, but it's not seamless. And I think Apple, out of all of the hardware providers, is probably the only one that can probably crack that.
And I guess just one last point on this one. This is all in the lead up to Apple potentially releasing a folding phone next year, which is probably why they're doing the multitasking thing, because obviously if it's a folding phone, that potentially is even more reason to not have a tablet and a laptop and any other device, because that could be your one device for the whole thing. Supposedly they've figured out a way to not have a crease in the screen when it's folding. I'm not really interested in the folding phone. I think it's a gimmick, you know, from my perspective. It's interesting, you know, like anything when they try something else, you know, it's not that it's not an interesting thing to look at and it's not an interesting device. It's just, I'm going to go back to the slab of glass really as a practical matter.
Yeah, I kind of, as I've voiced before, a friend who's got a Samsung Fold phone, and there's a lot to like about the Fold phone. And a lot of things that I wouldn't have personally ever thought that I would like or support. But it's a very specific use case. And it's the use case you've just stated, which is he does a lot of work on the go. He needs to read spreadsheets and more detailed documents. So that ability to fold out the phone is advantageous. But yeah, I'm kind of, there's a specific use case for it where it really works well. But I don't know, for the rest of us, I'm with you, slab of glass.
Yeah, and with you know, tariffs coming in, I guess it won't affect us, but you know, our friends in the US would probably have to pay twice as much for that folding phone, I'm sure.
Yeah, or Apple could just absorb that into their cost and still make a fortune.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there, Steve. Interesting times as far as that's concerned. And yeah, I guess we'll find out in a couple of weeks what this multitasking stuff is all about when Apple announces it.
Well, I'm sure that'll be an episode that we'll have a bit of fun with.
Absolutely. All right, so that's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.